The night Evan Brooks saved his boss's life, he had exactly $43 in his checking account and a sleeping daughter waiting at home. He didn't know that the trembling woman climbing into his back seat, designer dress torn, mascara streaming, was Margaret Hale, the CEO, who'd denied his raise request that very morning. He didn't know she'd been drugged. And he certainly didn't know that choosing kindness over a paycheck would cost him everything he'd worked for, and give him back something he'd lost long ago. This is a story about the moment when doing the right thing feels like the worst decision you could make. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The dashboard clock glowed 11:47 p.m. when Evan's phone buzzed with the notification that would change everything. He'd been idling outside the 24/7 convenience store on Riverside, watching the neon beer signs flicker in the window, debating whether he had one more ride in him. His body ached. His eyes burned. The coffee he'd bought 3 hours ago sat cold in the cup holder, a film forming across the surface like his exhaustion had taken physical form. But $43 wouldn't cover Mia's field trip permission slip, the one she'd handed him that morning with those hopeful brown eyes, so much like her mother's, asking if she could finally go somewhere with her class instead of staying behind. Again. Evan accepted the ride request. The pickup location made him pause. Marchand's, the French restaurant downtown where entrees cost more than he made in a night, the kind of place where valets wore nicer suits than he owned. He'd driven past it 1,000 times, never imagining he'd have reason to pull up to its gold-trimmed entrance. The streets were quieter now, that strange, hollow silence that settles over a city after the honest people go to bed and before the desperate ones give up. Evan navigated through downtown, past the closed storefronts and the few remaining bars spilling light and laughter onto sidewalks. A group of college kids stumbled across the street against the light, and he braked smoothly, waiting. One of them slapped the hood of his 10-year-old Camry, not hard, just drunk, and Evan said nothing, just waited for them to pass. He'd learned patience the hard way through 3 years of single parenthood and 4 years before that watching his wife slip away from him one hospital visit at a time. Patience was cheaper than anger, safer than hope. Marchand's came into view, all warm lighting and European elegance, utterly out of place among the glass and steel of the business district. Evan pulled to the curb, checking the app. Passenger name, M. Hale, 5-star rating, no other information. The valet gave him a look. The kind Evan had grown used to, the one that said your car doesn't belong here, but stepped aside when Evan showed him the phone. Picking up a passenger. Good luck with that, the valet muttered, and something in his tone made Evan's instincts prickle. He was about to ask what that meant when the restaurant door opened and a woman stumbled out. Stumbled was the right word. She moved like someone who'd forgotten how legs worked, each step a negotiation between intention and execution. Even from a distance, Evan could see she was dressed for the kind of evening he'd only seen in movies. A deep green dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent, heels that added 4 inches to her height, jewelry that caught the streetlight and threw it back in sharp points of gold. She was also crying, not the delicate, photogenic tears of actresses in romantic dramas. This was the raw, ugly kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and broken. Her mascara had run in black rivers down her cheeks. Her carefully styled hair had come partially loose, hanging in uneven waves around her face. And she was alone. Evan's hand was on the door handle before he'd consciously decided to move. Something was wrong. Every instinct he'd developed over 4 years of night driving was screaming at him. This wasn't a woman who'd had too much wine at dinner. This was something else. He rounded the car just as she reached for the rear door handle and missed, her hand pawing at empty air. She tried again, moving with the exaggerated care of someone who knew they weren't functioning properly and was trying to hide it. "Ma'am?" Evan kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. "Are you okay?" She turned toward him, and in the amber glow of the streetlight, he saw her face clearly for the first time. Recognition hit him like cold water. Margaret Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, the manufacturing company where Evan worked in the warehouse during the day. The woman whose signature was on every policy memo, every directive, every cost-cutting measure that made his day job a little harder. He'd seen her exactly 3 times in person, once during a mandatory all-hands meeting 2 years ago where she'd talked about operational efficiency, Once when she'd walked through the warehouse without making eye contact with anyone, and once, just that morning, when he'd finally worked up the courage to request a meeting about his raise proposal, and she'd denied it without looking up from her papers. Not viable at this time, Mr. Brooks. Compensation reviews are conducted annually. Next. 5 words. Didn't even meet his eyes. And now here she was, barely able to stand, tears streaming down her face, trying to get into his car. She didn't recognize him. He could see that in her unfocused gaze, the way she looked through him rather than at him. Whatever was happening to her, she was somewhere far away from this street corner, trapped in her own private emergency. "Please," she whispered, finally getting the door open. "Please, I need to go home." Evan's mind raced through the calculations. This was his boss. This was the woman who denied him the raise that would have meant he could work 1 job instead of 2, who could fire him with a word, who held his daughter's stability in her perfectly manicured hands. This was also a woman in trouble. "Of course," he said, reaching out to steady her elbow as she tried to climb into the back seat. "Let me help you." Her skin was cold beneath his fingers, and she flinched at the contact before seeming to realize he was trying to help. She collapsed into the seat with a sound that was half sob, half gasp of relief. Evan closed the door carefully and moved back to the driver's seat, his heart hammering. He pulled up the app to confirm the destination, an address in Willowbrook Heights. Of course. The neighborhood where houses started at $2 million and went up from there. He pulled away from the curb smoothly, checking his mirrors. The valet was watching them go with an expression Evan couldn't quite read. Concern? Judgment? Relief that she was someone else's problem now? For the first few blocks, Margaret was silent except for her ragged breathing. Evan kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching her curl into herself in the corner of the back seat. She'd wrapped her arms around her middle like she was trying to hold herself together through sheer force of will. "Ma'am, do you need me to take you to a hospital?" He kept his voice calm, professional. "You don't seem well." "No." The word came out sharp, almost violent. "No hospital, just home. Please." "Okay." Evan nodded, though she couldn't see him. "Just home. I've got you." Something about those words, "I've got you," seemed to break something in her. A fresh wave of tears came, quieter this time, but somehow more devastating. The kind of crying that came from someone who'd been holding it together for too long and had finally hit the wall. Evan drove carefully, taking the smoothest route he knew toward Willowbrook Heights. He'd been to the neighborhood exactly twice before, both times dropping off passengers who'd tipped in single dollars and looked at him like he was a servant. He told himself it didn't matter, that money was money, that his pride didn't put food on the table. But it had mattered. It always mattered. "I'm sorry." Margaret's voice was thick, slurred slightly. "I'm so sorry. I don't usually... I never..." She couldn't seem to finish the sentence. "You don't need to apologize," Evan said. "Everyone has rough nights." She laughed, a broken sound. "Rough nights, yes, that's what this is." They were passing through the business district now, the buildings Evan cleaned at his day job rising on either side. Somewhere up on the 14th floor of the Hale Industries tower, there was a maintenance closet where he kept his supplies. A place he'd stood this morning after Margaret rejected his raise request, gripping the handle of a mop and trying to remember why he was doing any of this. For Mia. Always for Mia. "What's your name?" Margaret asked suddenly. Evan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. If she recognized him, if she realized he was the warehouse worker she dismissed that morning, this could go very wrong very quickly. But lying felt worse than the risk of truth. "Evan," he said. "Evan Brooks?" She repeated it slowly, like she was trying to commit it to memory through whatever fog was clouding her mind. "Evan. Thank you, Evan." "Just doing my job, ma'am." "Margaret." She shifted in the back seat, and he saw her wince. "Call me Margaret. I don't feel like ma'am right now." "All right, Margaret." They fell silent again. Evan took the on-ramp to the highway that would carry them north toward the wealthier suburbs. Traffic was light at this hour, just a few trucks and the occasional car full of people heading home from late shifts like his own. "Do you have children, Evan?" Margaret's question came out of nowhere. He glanced in the mirror again. She was looking out the window now, her reflection ghostly against the passing lights. A daughter, Mia. She's 7. 7. Margaret's voice softened. That's a good age. Still believes in magic. Yeah. Evan smiled despite everything. Yeah, she does. I have a son. Have. Margaret pressed her hand against the window. Daniel, he's 16, doesn't talk to me much anymore. I'm not... She trailed off, her breath fogging the glass. I'm not very good at being a mother. Evan didn't know what to say to that. The personal revelation felt like stepping onto ice he couldn't trust. This wasn't the Margaret Hale who sent out corporate memos. This was someone else entirely, someone raw and real, and breaking apart in his back seat. I'm sure that's not true, he offered, knowing it was inadequate. It is. She said it with the flat certainty of someone who'd examined the evidence and found herself guilty. I chose the company. Every time. Every single time there was a choice between being a CEO and being a mother, I chose the company, and now he hates me for it, and I can't even blame him because he's right. Evan's throat tightened. He thought about Mia, about the choices he made every day. Working 2 jobs meant less time with her, but it also meant keeping the lights on, keeping food in the fridge, keeping her in a school where she was safe and learning. Was he choosing wrong too? Would she grow up resenting him for all the bedtimes he missed, all the school events he couldn't attend? Being a parent is impossible, he said quietly. There's no right answer. We just do the best we can. Margaret made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been pain. And what if your best isn't good enough? Then you get up the next day and try again. She went quiet after that, and Evan thought maybe she'd fallen asleep. But when he checked the mirror, her eyes were open, staring at nothing. They were entering Willowbrook Heights now, the houses growing larger and farther apart, set back from the road behind gates and manicured lawns. Old money and new money living side by side, competing to see who could build the most ostentatious display of wealth. I was so careful. Margaret's voice was barely audible. I never drink more than 1 glass. Never. But tonight There was this deal, this merger, and I thought it was all set, and then everything fell apart, and Marcus... She stopped, pressing her hand against her mouth like she could push the words back in. Evan's instincts were screaming again. Margaret, what happened tonight? I don't know. She sounded terrified. I remember having 1 drink, 1, at the bar before dinner, and then everything got fuzzy. Wrong. Like the world was tilting and I couldn't make it stop tilting. Cold dread settled in Evan's stomach. He'd heard enough stories, seen enough news reports. Did someone give you that drink? Marcus brought it over. Marcus Steele, my business partner. He said it was a celebration drink for the deal we were about to close. Her voice broke. But the deal didn't close. It fell apart at the table, and then I felt so strange. And I tried to leave, but I couldn't make my legs work right. And Marcus kept saying I should go upstairs, that he had a room, that I could rest there, and I knew... She was crying again now. I knew that if I went upstairs with him, something bad would happen. So I ran, or tried to run. I think I knocked over a table. I don't really remember. Evan's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Marcus Steele. He knew that name. Everyone who worked at Hale Industries knew that name. Steele had been trying to merge his tech company with Hale Industries for the past year. He came to the warehouse sometimes, walking through with Margaret, talking about synergies and optimization, which Evan had learned was corporate speak for cutting jobs. You did the right thing, Evan said, forcing his voice to stay calm, even as rage built in his chest. Getting out of there. That was exactly right. I called a car. I couldn't drive. Couldn't think straight enough to drive. I needed to get away from him. You're safe now, Evan told her. You're safe, and I'm getting you home. Am I? Margaret laughed bitterly. Safe? I don't even know what that word means anymore. The GPS directed Evan to turn onto Riverside Drive, where the houses were hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. He slowed, looking for the number Margaret's app had provided. There. Margaret pointed with a shaking hand. The gray one. The gate was already open, probably set to automatic. Evan pulled into the circular driveway, taking in the house. It was beautiful in that cold, architectural magazine way. All clean lines and expensive materials, more a statement of wealth than a home. He put the car in park and turned around in his seat. Margaret, I think you should go to the hospital. What you're describing, someone might have put something in your drink. You should get checked out, file a report. No. She was already shaking her head, fumbling with the door handle. No police, no hospital, no reports. Do you know what that would do? The media would eat it alive. CEO claimed she was drugged. They'd say I was drunk. They'd say I was making it up. They'd say I encouraged it. They'd destroy me. But if he did this to you, then he wins anyway. Margaret's voice rose, sharp with desperation and fury. Don't you see? If I report it, I'm the victim, weak, compromised. Every business decision I make will be questioned. Every partnership, every deal. The board will force me out for my own well-being. I've seen it happen. I've been in the room when it happened to other women. I can't. She got the door open and tried to step out, but her legs gave out. Evan was around the car in seconds, catching her before she hit the concrete. She was heavier than he expected, not because of her weight, but because she was completely limp, all her strength gone. I've got you, he said again, and this time she didn't protest. He half carried her toward the front door, her arm draped over his shoulders, his arm around her waist. She was trembling, her skin still cold despite the warm night air. Keys, she mumbled. In my purse. Her purse was still in the car. Evan glanced back at the Camry, measuring the distance, wondering if he could get her to lean against the wall without collapsing. But before he could decide, headlights swept across them. A car was pulling into the driveway behind them. A black BMW, sleek and expensive. Margaret went rigid in his arms. No, she whispered. No, no, no. The BMW parked, and a man got out. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Evan's car. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, never facing consequences. Marcus Steele. Margaret, he called out with false warmth, concern painted over something darker. There you are. You ran off so quickly. I was worried. Evan felt Margaret trying to make herself smaller, trying to hide behind him despite being nearly the same height. Her fear was a living thing, palpable and contagious. She's home now, Evan said, keeping his voice level. She's safe. Marcus's eyes finally settled on Evan, and his expression shifted from false concern to cold assessment. And who are you? Her driver. I see. Marcus took a step closer. Well, her driver. I'll take it from here. Margaret and I have some unfinished business to discuss. No, you won't. Evan didn't move, didn't step aside. She's home, she's safe, and you're leaving. Something dangerous flickered across Marcus's face. Do you know who I am? Don't care. I could have you fired. I could make sure you never work in this city again. Probably. Evan met his gaze steadily. But you're still leaving. They stared at each other for a long moment. Evan was acutely aware of every disadvantage he had in this situation. This man had money, power, connections. Evan had nothing but a 7-year-old daughter who needed him and a conscience that wouldn't let him walk away. But sometimes nothing was enough. This isn't over, Marcus said finally, his voice dropping to something ugly and honest. Yeah, it is. Evan's voice was quiet, certain. Walk away. For a moment, Evan thought Marcus would push it, thought he'd have to figure out how to defend both himself and Margaret while she could barely stand. But then Margaret spoke, her voice small but clear. Leave, Marcus, or I'll call the police right now and tell them everything. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Marcus's jaw tightened. You'll regret this, Margaret. Both of you. He got back in his BMW and reversed out of the driveway fast enough to leave rubber on the concrete. Evan watched until the taillights disappeared, his heart hammering. Keys, he said softly. Where's your purse? Car, front seat. Evan helped Margaret to the front door, leaning her gently against the wall. Stay right here. I'll be right back. He jogged to the car, grabbed her purse, designer leather, probably worth more than his monthly income, and was back at her side in seconds. She'd slid down the wall slightly, sitting now, her head against the stone. "Which pocket?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Inside. Zipper." He found the keys, a heavy fob for what had to be a luxury car somewhere in the garage, and a single house key. He helped her stand again, got the door open, guided her inside. The interior was as cold and perfect as the exterior. High ceilings, minimal furniture, everything in shades of white and gray. It looked like a hotel, not a home, somewhere you stayed temporarily, not somewhere you lived. "Where's your room?" Evan asked. "Upstairs, but I can't." She gestured helplessly at the stairs. "Couch is fine," Evan said, spotting the low white sofa in what he assumed was the living room. He helped her to it, easing her down carefully. She collapsed into the cushions with a shuddering sigh. "Water," he said. "I'm getting you water. Then I'm calling someone, a friend, family member, someone who should be here." "There's no one," she said it matter-of-factly. "My son is at boarding school. My parents are dead. My friends are business associates. There's no one." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with a loneliness Evan recognized. He'd felt it too, in those first months after Sarah died. That hollow awareness that you could disappear and it would take days for anyone to notice. He found the kitchen, all marble and stainless steel, and filled a glass with water. When he brought it back, Margaret had curled onto her side, her shoes kicked off, her eyes closed. "Margaret." He knelt beside the couch. "You need to drink some water." She opened her eyes. They were clearer now, whatever had been in her system starting to fade, leaving behind exhaustion and shame. "You should go. I'll be fine. I'm not leaving you alone like this. You have to." She pushed herself up slightly, accepting the water glass with shaking hands. "If anyone finds out about tonight, if anyone knows you were here, it'll ruin both of us. You see that, right?" Evan saw it. Saw exactly how the story would be twisted, how her enemies would use it, how he'd be portrayed as either a threat or a fool. Saw how his job at Hale Industries would evaporate, how the whispers would follow him. "I don't care," he said. "You should." Margaret took a sip of water, then another. "You have a daughter. You can't afford to not care. And you can't afford to be alone right now." They looked at each other, two people on opposite sides of every divide that mattered: wealth, power, education, opportunity, finding themselves in the same moment of impossible choice. "Please," Margaret whispered, "please just go. Pretend this never happened. I'm begging you." Evan thought about Mia, asleep at his sister's place, trusting that her father would make the right choices. Thought about the field trip permission slip, the overdue electric bill, the car payment coming due. Thought about all the reasons he should stand up, walk out, and forget this night ever happened. Then he thought about Sarah in those last weeks, when she'd been so scared and trying so hard to hide it. How she'd hated feeling weak, hated needing help, hated being seen as anything less than the strong woman she'd always been. "I'll go," he said finally, "but I'm coming back in the morning to check on you. You can't—" "I'll park down the street. I won't come to the door if you don't want. But I'm checking that you're okay." He stood, pulling a business card from his wallet. He'd had them made for the rideshare work, cheap cardstock with just his name and number. "This is my number. You call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I don't care what time it is." Margaret took the card with trembling fingers. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone should." Evan headed for the door, then paused. "Lock this behind me. Don't open it for anyone except people you absolutely trust." "There's no one I absolutely trust." The words hit him harder than they should have. He looked back at her, this powerful woman curled on her couch, looking small and lost and utterly alone. "Then trust me," he said, "just for tonight. Trust that I'm going to make sure you're safe." He left before she could argue, pulling the door closed behind him and waiting until he heard the lock click. He sat in his car for a long moment, watching the house, making sure no one else showed up. The neighborhood was silent, all the wealthy residents secure behind their walls and gates, oblivious to the small human drama that had just played out. Evan's phone showed 1:47 a.m. His shift was over. He should go pick up Mia from his sisters, go home, get whatever sleep he could manage before his day job started at 8. Instead, he pulled up his rideshare app and logged his final earnings for the night. $53, including Margaret's fare. Combined with what he'd made earlier, he'd just barely cover Mia's field trip. He thought about Margaret's words. What if your best isn't good enough? Then he thought about his answer. You get up the next day and try again. Evan put the car in gear and drove home through the empty streets, carrying the weight of a secret he hadn't asked for and a choice he couldn't take back. Whatever came next, whatever consequences waited for him in the morning, he'd face them. He'd done the right thing. Sometimes that had to be enough. The alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., drilling through the 2 hours of sleep Evan had managed to grab. He lay there for a moment, staring at the water-stained ceiling of his bedroom, wondering if last night had been real or some kind of exhaustion-induced hallucination. But his muscles ached from carrying Margaret. His shirt still smelled faintly of her expensive perfume. And when he checked his phone, there was her address in his rideshare history, proof that it had all happened. He dragged himself out of bed and into the shower, letting the lukewarm hot water heater was acting up again, wake him up properly. His mind kept circling back to Margaret's face when Marcus had shown up. The fear in her eyes. The way she'd tried to disappear behind him. There's no one I absolutely trust. Evan dressed in his work clothes, jeans, steel-toed boots, the gray Hale Industries polo shirt that marked him as maintenance staff. He checked on Mia, still asleep in her bed, her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. His sister Lisa had dropped her off late last night, giving Evan a look that said she knew he was running himself into the ground, but loved him too much to say it out loud. He kissed Mia's forehead gently, careful not to wake her. Lisa would be by at 7 to get her ready for school. It was their routine, this careful choreography of shared childcare that kept everything from falling apart. The drive to Hale Industries took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Evan stopped at the gas station for coffee, the cheapest cup they sold, and a breakfast sandwich that tasted like cardboard but would keep him going until lunch. He ate while driving, watching the city wake up around him. People in suits heading to office buildings, construction crews already at work, the whole machinery of commerce grinding into motion for another day. He pulled into the employee parking lot at 7:45, finding his usual spot in the back corner where the pavement was cracked and the lines had faded to suggestions. The executive parking was up front, marked with reserved signs and actual painted lines. Evan had never paid much attention to it before, but today he found himself looking for Margaret's car. A silver Mercedes, according to the company directory. He didn't see it. Inside the warehouse was already humming with activity. Forklifts moving pallets, workers checking inventory. The familiar rhythm of manufacturing that Evan had been part of for 4 years. He clocked in, grabbed his maintenance cart from the storage room, and started his rounds. First stop, the executive floor. 14 stories up, where the air was cleaner and the carpet was newer and everything smelled like money and decisions that affected people's lives. Evan pushed his cart out of the elevator, nodding to Sandra at the reception desk. She barely glanced at him. He was part of the furniture up here, invisible in the way that service workers always were to people who didn't want to see them. He started with the bathrooms, working methodically through his checklist. Stock the soap, replace the paper towels, clean the mirrors, mop the floors. Simple, repetitive work that let his mind wander while his hands stayed busy. He was finishing the men's room when he heard voices in the hallway outside. He recognized one immediately, Thomas Chen, the CFO. Evan had cleaned his office enough times to know the man's voice, loud and confident in that way people got when they'd never been told to be quiet. I'm telling you, something happened last night. Thomas sounded excited, the way people got when they had good gossip. Margaret missed the board dinner, just didn't show up. Marcus said she had some kind of episode at Marchand's and had to leave. Evan's hand stilled on the mop handle. An episode? That was Jennifer Corso, head of HR. What kind of episode? He didn't specify, but reading between the lines, I think she was drunk. Marcus said she could barely walk, knocked over a table on her way out. He tried to help her, but she refused and called a car instead. Evan's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. That wasn't what happened. That wasn't even close to what happened. But he kept mopping, kept his head down, invisible and silent, while they rewrote last night into something that fit their narrative. Well, that's concerning, Jennifer said carefully. The stress of the merger must be getting to her. Or she's finally cracking. Thomas laughed. I've been saying for years that she works too hard. You can't sustain that pace forever. Eventually something gives. They moved past the bathroom, their voices fading down the hallway. Evan stood there, gripping the mop handle, fighting the urge to chase after them and tell them the truth. But what good would that do? Who would believe the maintenance guy over the CFO? Who would even listen? He finished the bathrooms and moved on to the executive offices. Most were empty this early. Executives tended to drift in around 9, after the real work of running the building had already been done by people like Evan. He worked his way down the hall, emptying trash cans and dusting surfaces and trying not to think about the business card he'd given Margaret, still unreasonably hoping she might call. Margaret's office was at the end of the corridor, the corner suite with windows on 2 sides and a view of the city that probably cost more in rent than Evan made in a year. The door was closed. The lights were off. Evan hesitated, his hand on his cart. He shouldn't go in there. Should just skip it, come back later when she was there to unlock it. But something pulled at him, some need to see if there was any sign she was all right. He tried the handle, locked as expected. Looking for something? Evan turned to find David Marquez, Margaret's executive assistant, standing behind him with a coffee cup in each hand and suspicion in his eyes. Just checking if the office needs cleaning, Evan said evenly. Usually Ms. Hale's in by now. David's expression shifted slightly, some of the suspicion fading into worry. She called in sick, first time in 3 years. Is that weird? That feels weird. It was weird. Evan had worked here long enough to know that Margaret never missed work. She came in during snowstorms. She worked through holidays. She'd been at her desk the day after her father's funeral, according to warehouse gossip. Maybe she finally took a day off, Evan offered. Yeah, maybe. David didn't sound convinced. He unlocked the office door, flipping on the lights. Can you still clean it? She might come in later. Sure thing. Evan pushed his cart inside and David disappeared back toward his own desk. The office was pristine as always. Everything in its place. Margaret's desk held a computer monitor, a leather desk pad, and a single framed photograph. Evan had never looked at it closely before. It felt like an invasion. But today he let himself glance at it while he emptied her trash can. The photo showed a younger Margaret with a little boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old. They were at a beach somewhere, both of them smiling. The Margaret in the photograph looked different, softer, happier, like she hadn't yet learned to build walls around herself. That must be Daniel, the son she'd mentioned, the one who was 16 now and didn't talk to her much. Evan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting another rideshare request from someone who'd left the app running. But it was an unknown number, and the message made his heart stop. This is Margaret. Please don't come by the house. I'm fine. Thank you for last night. Please forget it happened. Evan read it 3 times, each word feeling like a door closing. She was shutting him out, drawing the line, making it clear that last night was an aberration she wanted to erase. He should feel relieved, should accept the boundary she was setting and move on with his life. Instead, he felt the same pull he'd felt last night when he'd seen her stumbling out of Marchand's, the same instinct that something was wrong and someone needed to help. He typed back, "Just wanted to make sure you're okay. I won't bother you. Take care of yourself." He hit send before he could second-guess it, then put his phone away and finished cleaning the office. When he was done, he moved on to the next one, and the next, working his way through the executive floor with the same methodical efficiency he brought to every shift. At 10 a.m., his radio crackled. "Brooks, we need you in conference room B. Coffee machine's acting up." Evan grabbed his toolbox and headed down to the 3rd floor, where the conference rooms were located. Conference room B was one of the bigger ones, usually reserved for important meetings. Today it was set up for what looked like a board presentation. Chairs arranged around the long table, folders at each seat, the projector already warming up. The coffee machine was a high-end model, the kind that ground beans fresh for each cup and probably cost more than Evan's car. It was also completely dead, its display screen showing an error code he didn't recognize. He was on his knees, pulling the panel off to check the water line, when voices approached from the hallway. Completely unacceptable. "The board meeting starts in an hour and she's not even here." Evan recognized that voice. Marcus Steele. He kept working, trying to become even more invisible than usual, but the group swept into the room like they owned it. Marcus, Thomas Chen, and two other executives Evan didn't know by name. "Has anyone actually spoken to her?" one of the unknowns asked. "Her assistant says she's ill," Thomas replied. "But given her behavior last night, I think we need to consider the possibility that this is something more serious." "What are you suggesting?" Marcus's voice had false concern layered over something eager and ugly. "I'm suggesting that perhaps Margaret is dealing with issues that are affecting her judgment, her ability to lead the company." Evan's hand stilled on the wrench he was holding. They were talking about removing her, using last night, the night Marcus had drugged her and tried to take advantage of her, as evidence that she was unfit for her position. "That's a serious accusation, Thomas." The second unknown voice, this one female. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm simply stating facts. Margaret missed a crucial board dinner. She was seen in a compromised state. And now she's calling in sick on the day we're supposed to vote on the biggest merger in company history. If that doesn't raise concerns about her stability, what does?" "Marcus, you were there last night?" The woman again. "What exactly did you witness?" "I saw a colleague in distress," Marcus said smoothly. "I tried to help, but Margaret became aggressive. Paranoid, even. She accused me of, well, it doesn't matter what she accused me of. The point is, her behavior was erratic and concerning." Evan wanted to stand up, wanted to tell them all exactly what Marcus had done, what he'd tried to do. But his phone was buzzing again, another message from Margaret's number. "Please, I'm begging you, don't get involved. You have a daughter. Think of her." His hand shook as he put the phone away. She knew. Somehow she knew that he was hearing this, or could guess what he'd be hearing. She was warning him off, trying to protect him even while they were plotting to destroy her. "I think we need to table the merger vote," Thomas said, "until we can assess Margaret's fitness to continue as CEO." "That's not necessary," Margaret's voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone turned. Evan straightened up from behind the coffee machine, getting his first look at her since last night. She looked immaculate, hair perfect, makeup flawless. A charcoal suit that probably cost thousands, tailored to intimidate. But Evan could see the signs no one else noticed. The slight tremor in her hands as she set her briefcase on the table. The extra concealer under her eyes. The way she was holding herself too carefully, like someone who was hurting but refused to show it. "Margaret." Marcus recovered first, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "We weren't expecting you. Your assistant said you were ill." "I was. I'm better now." She met his gaze steadily, and Evan saw steel there. Whatever had broken in her last night, she'd put it back together with sheer force of will. "Shall we proceed with the board meeting, or did you have other plans?" The silence stretched out, thick with tension and unspoken accusations. Thomas glanced at Marcus. Marcus looked at the two other executives. Everyone was calculating, measuring, trying to figure out their next move. "Of course," Thomas said finally. "We're glad you're feeling better. We were just concerned." How thoughtful. Margaret's smile was sharp enough to cut. "I'm touched by your concern, truly." She turned then, and her eyes landed on Evan for the first time. Something flickered in her expression, recognition, warning, pleading, and then it was gone, her professional mask sliding back into place. "Is the coffee machine working?" she asked, her voice perfectly neutral. "Almost done, ma'am." Evan kept his tone just as neutral, just as professional. "Should have it up and running in a few minutes." "Excellent. Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for the meeting." She swept out of the room, and the executives followed, their conspiracy temporarily disrupted by her unexpected appearance. Evan was left alone with the coffee machine, his hands still shaking, his mind racing. He fixed the machine, a clogged water line, simple enough, and tested it to make sure it was working. Then he packed up his tools and headed back to his cart, trying to process everything he'd just witnessed. Margaret was fighting back. Despite everything Marcus had done, despite the conspiracy forming around her, she was showing up and refusing to be pushed out. There was something magnificent about it, and something terrifying. Because Evan had seen Marcus's face when Margaret walked in. He hadn't looked embarrassed or caught out. He'd looked like someone who'd just been handed a better weapon. Evan spent the rest of the morning on autopilot, going through his maintenance rounds while his mind spun through scenarios and possibilities. At noon, he took his lunch break in his car, eating a sandwich he'd packed that morning and checking his phone obsessively. No new messages from Margaret. He shouldn't care. Should let it go. Let her handle her own problems. She'd made it clear she didn't want his help, didn't want him involved. But he kept thinking about her face last night, the raw vulnerability before she'd rebuilt her armor. He kept thinking about the son who didn't talk to her, the empty house, the loneliness she wore like a second skin. There's no one I absolutely trust. At 2 p.m., Evan's radio crackled again. Brooks, executive floor, Ms. Hale's office, water leak. He grabbed his cart and headed for the elevator, trying to ignore the nervous energy building in his chest. A water leak. That could mean anything or nothing. Could be routine maintenance or could be Margaret creating a reason to see him. The executive floor was quieter now, most people in meetings or at lunch. David was at his desk outside Margaret's office, looking stressed. Thank God you're here. Something's leaking under her desk. I can hear it dripping, but I can't find the source. Evan nodded and knocked on Margaret's door. Her voice came through, controlled and professional. Come in. He pushed his cart inside and closed the door behind him. Margaret was standing by her window, looking out at the city, her back to him. She didn't turn around. There's no leak, she said quietly. I figured. I had to see you, had to warn you. She still didn't turn. Marcus knows something happened last night. He doesn't know what, but he knows I had a driver. He's looking into it. Evan's stomach dropped. How do you know? Because he told me. Just now, in the board meeting. He pulled me aside after and said he was concerned about my episode last night, and that he'd tracked down my rideshare driver to make sure I'd gotten home safely. He asked if I remembered the driver's name. What did you tell him? Nothing. I told him I didn't remember anything after leaving the restaurant, that it was all a blur. She turned finally, and Evan could see the exhaustion behind her professional facade. But he's not going to stop looking, and when he finds you, I can handle Marcus Steele. No, you can't. Her voice was sharp with fear and frustration. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Marcus doesn't just destroy people. He erases them. He'll make sure you never work again, never get a job, never... She stopped, pressing her hand against her forehead. I'm trying to protect you. By lying about what happened? By keeping you out of it. If Marcus connects you to last night, if he realizes you know what he tried to do, he'll bury you. And I won't be responsible for that. Evan moved closer, lowering his voice. What about the board meeting? What happened with the merger vote? Margaret laughed bitterly. They tabled it, said they needed more time to review the terms, but what they really meant was they needed time to decide if I'm stable enough to lead the company through it. She met his eyes. Marcus is going to push for my removal. He's building a case, using last night as evidence that I'm unfit. And the worst part is, I can't defend myself without admitting what really happened, which would make me look even weaker. You're not weak. No, but I'm alone, which in this world amounts to the same thing. She straightened, pulling herself together with visible effort. You need to delete our text messages. Delete my ride from your app history. If anyone asks, you never picked me up last night. You were done with your shift, you went home, you've never spoken to me outside of normal employee interactions. Can you do that? Evan thought about his daughter, about the field trip she was so excited about the fragile stability he'd built for them. Thought about all the reasons Margaret was right, that getting involved in corporate politics and power plays was a mistake he couldn't afford. Then he thought about Sarah's voice in those last days. Promise me you'll teach her to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I'm not going to lie for him, Evan said. If someone asks me what happened last night, I'm going to tell the truth. That's noble and stupid, and it's the right thing to do. Margaret stared at him, something complicated moving behind her eyes. Why? Why are you willing to risk everything for someone you barely know? Because you were right last night. Being a parent is impossible. There's no perfect answer, but I can't teach my daughter to do the right thing if I'm not willing to do it myself. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then. That's when it matters most. They stood there in her expensive office, looking at each other across the divide of their different worlds. Outside the window, the city hummed with commerce and ambition and all the small compromises people made to get ahead. But in this moment, In this room, there were just two people choosing what kind of humans they wanted to be. There might be another way, Margaret said slowly. A way that doesn't put you at risk. I'm listening. I could go to the board myself, tell them what Marcus did. But I'd need evidence. Something more than my word against his. She pulled out her phone. Last night, before everything went completely wrong, I was recording the dinner meeting for my notes. The recording should have caught the moment when Marcus brought me that drink, the things he said before everything got fuzzy. Did you check the recording? I can't bring myself to listen to it, to hear my own voice getting slower and more confused, to know what was happening to me in real time. Her hand tightened on the phone. But if it's there, if it's clear enough, it might be enough to protect both of us. Evan understood what she was asking without her having to say it. She needed someone else to listen first, someone she could trust to tell her if it was usable, if it was worth the cost of going public. Send it to me, he said. I'll listen. If it's not clear, if it doesn't prove anything, then we figure out plan B, but we won't know until we listen. Margaret nodded, her fingers moving across her phone screen. A moment later, Evan's phone buzzed with an incoming file. 2 hours and 47 minutes of audio. I should get back to work, he said, before David wonders what's taking so long with this non-existent leak. Evan? She stopped him as he reached for the door. Thank you for last night, for today, for all of it. Don't thank me yet. We don't know how this ends. No, but I know that whatever happens, I'm not alone in it anymore. That's something. Evan left the office, pulling his cart behind him, nodding to David as he passed. All fixed, just a loose connection. Back in the elevator, back down to the warehouse level, back to the familiar rhythm of his day job. But everything felt different now. The stakes had risen, the danger had crystallized, and Evan had made a choice that couldn't be unmade. His shift ended at 4. He clocked out, grabbed his things from his locker, and headed for his car. The parking lot was half empty now, most of the day shift already gone. Evan sat in his Camry, pulled out his phone, and opened the audio file Margaret had sent. He plugged in his earbuds and hit play. At first, it was just ambient noise, restaurant sounds, multiple conversations overlapping, the clink of glasses and silverware. Then Margaret's voice, clear and professional, outlining the terms of the merger. Marcus responding, equally professional. Business talk, nothing interesting. Evan fast-forwarded, listening at double speed for anything relevant. 15 minutes in, 20, 30. The dinner conversation continued, boring and technical. He was starting to think there was nothing useful here when Margaret's voice changed. Marcus, what's in this drink? It tastes strange. Just a celebration toast. Special champagne. You work too hard, Margaret. You should relax. I don't feel right. Something's wrong. You're fine, just stressed. Why don't we go upstairs? I have a suite. You can rest there. No, I can't think straight. I'll help you. Let me help you, Margaret. Don't touch me. There was the sound of a chair scraping, something clattering, the table she'd knocked over, then running footsteps, Margaret's breathing harsh and panicked, and the audio cut off. Evan played it again, and again. His hands were shaking with rage by the third listen. It was all there. Marcus's false concern, his insistence that she go to his room, the moment when Margaret realized something was wrong and tried to escape. It wasn't proof of drugging, not technical proof that would stand up in court, but it was evidence of intent, evidence that Margaret had been clear that she didn't want his help, that she wanted to leave, that he tried to prevent her. Evan forwarded the relevant section to his own email, creating a backup. Then he texted Margaret, "It's there. It's usable. What do you want to do?" Her response came back almost immediately. "Board emergency meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'm going to play it for them." And if they don't believe you? Then at least I went down fighting. Evan sat in his car, watching the late afternoon sun paint the parking lot in gold and shadow, knowing that tomorrow everything would change. For better or worse, the truth was coming out. He started the car and headed to pick up Mia from after-school care, trying to shake off the weight of what was coming. But when he got there and saw her running toward him with a picture she'd drawn, him and her holding hands, both of them smiling, he knew he'd made the right choice. "Daddy, look what I made!" "It's beautiful, sweetheart." He scooped her up, holding her close. "Tell me about your day." and for a little while, in the simple joy of his daughter's chatter, Evan let himself forget about corporate conspiracies and emergency board meetings and all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. Let himself just be a father, which was the only role that had ever really mattered anyway. That night, Evan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of his apartment, the refrigerator humming, the upstairs neighbor's footsteps, Mia's soft breathing from her room down the hall. Normal sounds that should have been comforting but felt like the calm before a storm he couldn't control. At 2 a.m., he gave up on sleep entirely and moved to the living room, pulling out his laptop. He spent the next 3 hours researching Marcus Steele, going down rabbit holes of business articles and corporate filings. What he found didn't make him feel any better. Marcus wasn't just wealthy and connected, he was methodical. Every company he'd acquired, every merger he'd orchestrated, followed the same pattern. Identify weakness, exploit it, take control. 3 CEOs had resigned under mysterious circumstances after opposing his deals. 2 had disappeared from the business world entirely. The articles were carefully worded, never quite saying what had happened, but the implication was clear enough. Marcus Steele destroyed people who got in his way, and tomorrow, Margaret was going to stand up in front of the board and accuse him of attempted assault. Evan's phone buzzed at 5 a.m., startling him out of a half-doze on the couch. A text from an unknown number. "Tell Margaret to reconsider, for everyone's sake." His blood ran cold. They knew. Somehow Marcus's people had connected him to Margaret, had gotten his number. The message was polite, almost friendly, but the threat underneath was crystal clear. He deleted the text and took a long shower, letting the hot water, he'd finally fixed the heater last week, wash away some of the anxiety. When he emerged, Mia was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her coloring book spread out around her. "You're up early, sweetheart," he said, moving to start breakfast. "Couldn't sleep. Too excited." She looked up at him with those eyes so much like Sarah's. "Today's the field trip, remember?" Evan had completely forgotten. The permission slip he'd worked that extra ride to afford, the trip Mia had been talking about for weeks, the aquarium. She'd been studying ocean animals in science class and was convinced she was going to be a marine biologist when she grew up. "Of course I remember," he lied, plastering on a smile. "What time do you need to be at school?" 8:30. Ms. Rodriguez said we're leaving at 9 sharp, so don't be late dropping me off." She went back to her coloring, completely trusting that her father would make it all work out. Evan made her favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes, just a few chips, not too many, and watched her eat while his coffee went cold in his cup. The board meeting was at 9. He was supposed to be at work at 8, and Mia needed to be at school by 8:30. The math didn't work. He could drop Mia off and skip the board meeting, could let Margaret fight her battle alone, keep his head down, protect the small, stable world he'd built for his daughter. No one could blame him for choosing her first. She was 7 years old and she needed her father. But the recording played in his mind on loop. Margaret's voice, confused and scared. Marcus's false concern masking predatory intent. And he thought about all the ways his silence would teach Mia the wrong lessons about what mattered, about when to stand up and when to look away. "Daddy?" Mia was watching him with concern. "Are you okay? You look sad." "Just tired, sweetheart. Long week." He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Hey, how would you feel about Lisa taking you to school today instead of me?" Her face fell slightly. "You're not coming?" "I have something important I need to do at work, but I promise I'll be there when you get back from the aquarium. You can tell me all about the sharks and the dolphins and everything you saw?" Mia considered this, her 7-year-old mind weighing the disappointment against the promise. "Will you really be there? You promised last time and you had to work late." The words hit him harder than she could know. He had promised last time, promised to pick her up from Lisa's place before dinner, and then a water main had broken at the warehouse, and he'd been stuck there until almost 9. She'd already been asleep when he got there. "I promise," he said, and meant it with everything he had. "Nothing is more important than hearing about your field trip." She smiled then, and the trust in that smile made his chest ache. "Okay, but you have to promise, promise. Pinky, promise." He held out his pinky and she hooked hers around it, sealing the deal with the solemnity of a child for whom pinky promises were binding contracts. At 7:30, he called Lisa. "Please tell me you're not calling to cancel," his sister said by way of greeting. "I already rearranged my morning to take Mia." "I'm not canceling. Something's come up at work. Something important. I might need you to be on standby in case it goes wrong." There was a pause. Lisa knew him well enough to hear what he wasn't saying. "Evan, what's going on? You sound stressed." "I can't really explain right now, but if I call you today and tell you I need help, I need you to come get Mia from school. Can you do that?" "Of course I can, but you're scaring me a little. Are you in trouble?" "I don't know yet." It was the most honest answer he could give. "I'm trying to do the right thing, and sometimes that gets complicated." "The right thing according to who? You or your boss?" Evan thought about that. "According to me. And maybe that's the problem." Lisa sighed. "Sarah always said you had an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. Be careful, okay? Mia needs you in one piece." "I know. I will." He got Mia ready for school, packing her lunch and making sure she had her permission slip and the spending money for the gift shop. Lisa arrived at 8:15, giving Evan a long look that said they'd be having a longer conversation about this later. "Have fun at the aquarium," he told Mia, hugging her tight. "I love you, sweetheart." "Love you too, Daddy. Promise, promise you'll be there after." "Promise, promise." He watched them drive away, then got in his own car and headed toward Hale Industries. The morning traffic was heavy, everyone rushing to get to work on time, oblivious to the small human dramas playing out in the cars around them. Evan's hands were steady on the wheel, but his mind was racing through scenarios. Best case? Margaret played the recording, the board believed her, Marcus was removed from the merger deal, and Evan kept his job. Worst case? The board sided with Marcus, Margaret was forced out, and Evan became collateral damage in a corporate power play he'd stumbled into by accident. Most likely case. Somewhere in between, messy and complicated and full of consequences he couldn't predict. He pulled into the Hale Industries parking lot at 8:40. The executive spaces were already filling up, black sedans and luxury SUVs, the vehicles of people who made decisions that affected hundreds of lives without ever having to face the people those decisions hurt. Evan sat in his car for a moment, gathering himself. His phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. Last chance to be smart. He deleted it and got out of the car. The lobby was busy with the morning rush, employees badging in, heading for the elevators, coffee cups in hand and phones to their ears. Evan badged in with his maintenance credentials and headed for the stairs instead of the elevator. 14 flights would give him time to think, to prepare, to make sure this was really what he wanted to do. By the time he reached the executive floor, his legs were burning and he was breathing hard. The hallway was quiet, most people already in the boardroom for the emergency meeting. Evan could hear voices behind the heavy wooden doors, muffled but urgent. He found an alcove near the boardroom where he could wait without being immediately visible. From here, he could hear the meeting start, could listen through the door. Margaret's voice came first, clear and controlled. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I know this is irregular, but what I need to share with you couldn't wait." "Margaret, if this is about the merger," that was Thomas Chen, already trying to redirect the conversation. "This is about Marcus Steele and why Hale Industries should not, under any circumstances, move forward with this partnership." The room went silent. Evan could picture them all, the board members in their expensive suits, exchanging glances, wondering what was coming. "That's quite an accusation," Marcus said, his voice smooth. "I hope you have evidence to support it." "I do." There was the sound of something being set up, probably Margaret connecting her phone to the boardroom sound system. 2 nights ago, Mr. Steele and I met at Marchand's to finalize the merger details. What happened there is something I've struggled with sharing because I knew how it would be perceived. But I've decided that the truth, however uncomfortable, is better than silence. Margaret, if you're having second thoughts about the merger, we can discuss. I'm not having second thoughts about the merger. I'm telling you that Marcus Steele drugged me with the intent to assault me. The silence that followed was absolute. Evan pressed closer to the door, his heart hammering. "That is a serious accusation," someone said finally. A woman's voice, calm but strained. "Do you have any proof?" I have this recording from that evening. I was recording the meeting for my notes. What it captured was something else entirely. The audio started playing, tinny through the door, but clear enough. Evan heard it all again, the conversation, the moment when Margaret realized something was wrong. Marcus's insistence that she go to his suite, her refusal, the sound of her escape. When it ended, the silence was even heavier than before. This is ridiculous. Marcus's voice had changed, the smoothness replaced by something sharp and dangerous. That recording proves nothing. Margaret had too much to drink and became paranoid. I was trying to help her, and she misconstrued my intentions. I had one drink, one, and I don't get drunk from one glass of champagne. Unless you were already stressed and exhausted, which everyone knows you were. The merger negotiations have been intense. You've been working 18-hour days. Is it really surprising that you might have had a physical reaction to alcohol in that state? Evan could hear the shift happening, the way Marcus was reframing the narrative, making it about Margaret's stress, her exhaustion, her perception rather than his actions. I know what happened to me, Margaret said, but there was a tremor in her voice now, doubt creeping in, or maybe just exhaustion from fighting. Of course you do. You had a frightening experience, and you're trying to make sense of it. But accusing me of drugging you, of attempted assault, that's not just wrong, Margaret. It's defamatory. And it raises serious questions about your judgment and your fitness to lead this company through a major merger. He's right, Thomas Chen's voice. Margaret, I say this as a friend and colleague. I think you need to step back, take some time off, get some rest. Let someone else handle the merger negotiations. I don't need rest. I need you to listen to what I'm telling you. We are listening, the woman's voice again. But what we're hearing is a recording of a business dinner where you became unwell. That's concerning, but it's not evidence of a crime. And making accusations like this in front of the full board without concrete proof, it makes us worry about you. Evan's hands clenched into fists. They weren't going to believe her. Despite the recording, despite everything, they were choosing the narrative that was easier to accept, the one that didn't require them to confront the monster in their boardroom. So that's it? Margaret's voice was hollow now. You're going to take his word over mine? It's not about taking sides, Thomas said. It's about what we can prove and what we can't. And right now, all we can prove is that you had a difficult evening and are making serious accusations without sufficient evidence. Then let me get the evidence. Let me go to the police, file a report, get a toxicology test. It's been 2 days, Marcus interrupted. Any substances would be out of your system by now. All you'd accomplish is creating a media circus that would destroy this company's reputation. Is that what you want? Evan had heard enough. He pushed through the boardroom door before he could second-guess himself, before fear could override the rage burning in his chest. Every head in the room turned toward him. 12 board members around a long table, Margaret standing at the head with her phone still connected to the speakers, and Marcus Steele sitting halfway down with an expression that went from surprise to calculation in a heartbeat. Who the hell are you? Thomas Chen demanded. Evan Brooks, maintenance staff. He looked directly at Margaret, seeing the fear and gratitude warring in her eyes. I'm also the rideshare driver who picked up Ms. Hale 2 nights ago. The room erupted in whispers. Marcus's face had gone carefully blank, but Evan saw his jaw tighten. This is a private board meeting, Thomas said. You need to leave immediately or I'll call security. I'll leave after I say what I came to say. Evan turned to face the board. Ms. Hale is telling you the truth. I picked her up outside Marchand's at 11:47 p.m. She could barely walk. She was crying, confused, clearly not in control of her faculties. She told me someone had given her a drink and that she felt wrong, that she knew something bad would happen if she didn't get away. And you didn't take her to a hospital? Marcus's voice was sharp. If she was in such terrible condition, why didn't you take her to a hospital? Because she begged me not to, because she was terrified of how it would look, of how people would use it against her. Evan met his gaze steadily. And she was right to be terrified, wasn't she? This is hearsay, one of the board members said. He's her employee. Of course he's going to support her story. I'm her employee, but I didn't even know she was my boss until she got in my car, and I'm risking my job right now by being here. What do I have to gain from lying? Job security, Marcus suggested. A promotion. Special treatment. There are lots of reasons an ambitious maintenance worker might lie for his CEO. Evan felt the anger surge again, but forced himself to stay calm. You're right, I could be lying, but here's what I know for certain. After I got Ms. Hale home, you showed up at her house. The room went silent again. Marcus's expression flickered. I was worried about her, Marcus said. I wanted to make sure she got home safely. You wanted to make sure she was alone and vulnerable. You followed her home, Mr. Steele, and when I wouldn't let you near her, you threatened me, told me I'd never work in this city again. That's not... I never... Marcus stopped, regrouping. I may have been frustrated that a driver was preventing me from checking on a colleague, but I never threatened anyone. You told me this wasn't over, that we'd both regret it. Evan pulled out his phone, pulled up his rideshare app. I have the records. Timestamps showing exactly when I picked up Ms. Hale, when we arrived at her address, and the location data that shows another vehicle arriving 15 minutes later and parking in her driveway. He held up the phone, letting the board members see the screen. Several leaned forward, squinting at the data. Location data can be faked, Marcus said, but there was an edge to his voice now, desperation creeping in. So can a lot of things, Evan agreed. But here's what can't be faked. Ms. Hale asked me to keep that night secret. She didn't want anyone to know what happened because she knew exactly how it would be used against her. And I kept that secret until right now, even though I work for this company and could have used the information to my advantage. Why would I do that if I was just making up a story for personal gain? Because she's paying you, Thomas said, or promised to pay you. She hasn't offered me anything. She actually told me to stay out of it, to protect myself and my daughter, but I can't do that. Because if I walk away and let you all pretend this didn't happen, then I'm complicit. And I have a daughter who's going to grow up in a world where men like Marcus Steele can drug women and suffer no consequences. I can't look her in the eye and tell her to stand up for what's right if I'm not willing to do it myself. The woman board member, Evan could see her nameplate now, Patricia Joe, was watching him with something like respect. Mr. Brooks, you said Mrs. Hale was your boss, but you didn't know it at the time. How did you find out? I work in the warehouse during the day. Maintenance at night. I recognized her when she got in my car. He paused, deciding to risk full honesty. I'd actually met with her that morning to request a raise. She denied it, didn't even look at me, so I didn't have any particular loyalty to her when I picked her up that night. I helped her because it was the right thing to do, not because of who she was. And yet here you are, risking your job for her. I'm risking my job for the truth. There's a difference. Patricia looked at Margaret. Is what he's saying accurate about the raise request? Margaret nodded slowly. I denied his request that morning. I don't even remember the meeting clearly. I was preparing for the merger negotiations and I was distracted. But yes, I denied it. Mr. Brooks had no reason to help me except basic human decency. This is absurd, Marcus stood abruptly. You're all going to believe some maintenance worker over me? I've built 3 companies from the ground up. I've created thousands of jobs. My reputation is impeccable. So was Harvey Weinstein's, Evan said quietly, until it wasn't. The comparison hung in the air like a bomb. Marcus's face went red, his hands clenching at his sides. You have no idea who you're dealing with, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I will destroy you. I will destroy your family. You'll wish you'd kept your mouth shut. Is that a threat, Mr. Steele? Patricia's voice was cold. Because it certainly sounds like a threat, in front of 12 witnesses. Marcus seemed to realize his mistake. He straightened, trying to regain composure. Of course not. I'm simply stating facts. Mr. Brooks has defamed me with serious accusations. I have every right to pursue legal action. As does Mrs. Hale, Patricia said, against you for what happened that night. Nothing happened that night except a colleague having too much to drink and creating a scene. Then you won't mind if we investigate, Patricia said. Thoroughly. Interview the staff at Marchand's. Check security footage. See if your story holds up under scrutiny. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Marcus's face. This is a waste of company resources. The merger can wait. Patricia looked around the table. All in favor of suspending merger negotiations pending an independent investigation into the events of 2 nights ago? Hands went up around the table. Not all of them. Thomas Chen kept his hands firmly on the table, as did 2 others, but enough. A clear majority. The motion passes, Patricia said. Mr. Steele, you're welcome to remain for the rest of the meeting, but I think it would be best if you left. Marcus looked around the table, calculating. Evan could see him weighing his options, trying to find an angle, but the board had turned against him, at least for now, and there was nothing left to do but retreat and regroup. This isn't over, Marcus said, looking directly at Margaret. Then his eyes shifted to Evan. For either of you. He walked out, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Thomas Chen turned to Evan. You need to leave now, Mr. Brooks. This is still a private board meeting. Of course. Evan looked at Margaret one more time. She mouthed 2 words. Thank you. He nodded and left, his legs shaking as he walked down the hallway toward the elevator. He'd done it. He'd told the truth and survived. But Marcus's parting words echoed in his mind. This isn't over. Back in the hallway, Evan leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. His phone was buzzing constantly now. Texts from unknown numbers, some threatening, some offering money for his story. He ignored them all. The boardroom door opened and Margaret stepped out, closing it behind her. She looked drained, like she'd used up every reserve of strength just getting through the meeting. They're voting on whether to open a formal investigation, she said. Patricia thinks it will pass. But even if it does, Marcus has resources, lawyers, private investigators. He's going to come after both of us. I know. I tried to protect you from this. I know that too. Evan pushed off from the wall. But some things are more important than protection. Margaret studied him for a long moment. Your daughter, the field trip. You should go. Be there when she gets back. How did you... You mentioned it in the car, that night. You told me about her. Margaret managed a small smile. Go be with her, Evan. Let me handle the rest of this. Are you going to be okay? I don't know, but at least now I'm not handling it alone. She straightened her shoulders, pulling herself together. Thank you for everything. I know those words aren't enough, but they're enough, Evan said. Go finish your meeting. I'll check in later. He took the stairs down, needing the physical exertion to burn off the adrenaline still coursing through his system. 14 flights gave him time to process what had just happened, what it might mean for his future. He'd walked into a boardroom full of powerful people and told the truth. He'd stood up to Marcus Steele. He'd risked everything for someone who'd denied his raise request just 2 days ago, and somehow, impossibly, it felt like the rightest thing he'd ever done. His phone rang as he reached the ground floor. Lisa's number. Hey, he said, stepping outside into the morning sunlight. Everything okay? Everything's fine. Mia got to school on time, very excited about the Sharks. But Evan, are you okay? You sounded really strange this morning. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I just did something scary and it didn't destroy me. That's cryptic and concerning. I'll explain later. Right now I just need to make sure I'm free this afternoon to pick up Mia. Can you cover for me if I'm running late? Of course. But seriously, what's going on? Evan looked back at the Hale Industries building, at the 14th floor where Margaret was still fighting her battle. I'm learning that doing the right thing is more complicated than I thought, but also more important. Sarah would be proud of you, Lisa said softly. Whatever it is you did, if it scared you that much, she'd be proud you did it anyway. Evan's throat tightened. Yeah, I hope so. He hung up and got in his car, but he didn't start the engine immediately. Instead, he sat there, letting the moment wash over him. He'd crossed a line this morning that couldn't be uncrossed. He'd made himself visible in a way that couldn't be undone. He'd put himself and his daughter at risk for a principle, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat. His phone buzzed one more time, a text from Margaret. Board voted to investigate 9-3. Thank you for your courage. It gave me mine back. Evan smiled and started the car. He had 5 hours until Mia's field trip ended. 5 hours to figure out what came next, how to protect his daughter from the fallout, how to navigate a world that had suddenly become much more complicated. But first, he was going to go home, take a shower, and maybe sleep for an hour, because whatever battles tomorrow brought, he'd need his strength. And this time, he wouldn't be fighting them alone. Evan made it home and managed exactly 47 minutes of sleep before his phone started ringing. Not buzzing with texts, actually ringing, which meant someone wanted to talk rather than threaten. He grabbed it off the nightstand, squinting at the screen. David Marquez, Margaret's assistant. Hello? Mr. Brooks, I need you to come back to the building. There's a situation. Evan sat up, instantly awake. What kind of situation? HR wants to see you, so does building security. And there are 2 lawyers in the conference room asking questions about you. David's voice dropped lower. I probably shouldn't be calling you, but Ms. Hale asked me to give you a heads up. She's in with the lawyers now trying to run interference, but they're insisting on speaking with you directly. What do they want? Officially, to get your statement about the incident? Unofficially? David paused. Marcus Steele has retained counsel. They're building a defamation case, and you're a primary target. Of course. Evan had known this was coming, but knowing and experiencing were different things. Tell them I'll be there in 30 minutes. Ms. Hale also wanted me to tell you that you should consider getting your own lawyer before you talk to anyone. I can't afford a lawyer, David. She said you'd say that. She's prepared to cover your legal costs if... No. Evan was already out of bed, pulling on clean clothes. I appreciate it, but no. That just gives them ammunition to claim I'm on her payroll. Mr. Brooks, these people are serious. Marcus Steele doesn't make idle threats. Neither do I. Evan grabbed his keys. I'll be there soon. The drive back to Hale Industries felt surreal. Just hours ago, he'd walked out feeling like he'd won some kind of victory. Now reality was reasserting itself with lawyers and HR meetings and the full weight of corporate machinery turning its attention to the maintenance worker who'd dared to speak up. He parked in his usual spot and walked through the employee entrance, badging in with credentials he half expected to be deactivated. But the light turned green and the door clicked open, and Evan made his way through the familiar halls toward the executive floor. David was waiting by the elevator, looking stressed. They're in conference room A, the lawyers, I mean. HR is in B. Security wants to see you after that. In that order? Your choice, actually, but the lawyers are the most aggressive about it. Evan thought for a moment. I'll start with security. Get the easy one out of the way first. David led him to a small office near the loading docks where Jim Reeves, head of building security, was waiting. Jim was ex-military, 50s, with a no-nonsense demeanor that Evan had always respected. They'd worked together on several maintenance emergencies over the years. Brooks, Jim gestured to a chair. Sit down. We need to talk about this morning. Am I being fired? Not by me, but I need to understand what happened. You entered a private board meeting without authorization. That's a serious security breach. Evan sat, meeting Jim's gaze steadily. I had information relevant to the meeting. I shared it. That's all. That's all? Jim leaned back in his chair. You interrupted a board meeting, made accusations against one of the most powerful businessmen in the state, and created a situation that now has lawyers crawling all over this building. That's not all, Brooks. That's a Category 5 hurricane. I told the truth. The truth? Jim shook his head. You know how many people lose their jobs because they told the truth? Truth doesn't pay the bills. Truth doesn't keep you employed. Maybe it should. They stared at each other for a long moment. Jim's expression was unreadable, but something shifted in his eyes. Off the record, Jim said finally. What you did took guts. On the record, I have to write you up for the security breach. It'll go in your file. If this blows up, it gives the company justification to let you go. You understand that? I understand. Good. Jim pulled out a form, started filling it out. Now tell me exactly what happened, from the beginning. And Brooks, don't leave anything out. The lawyers are going to ask you the same questions, and if your stories don't match, they'll crucify you with the inconsistency. Evan told him everything. The rideshare pickup, Margaret's condition, Marcus showing up at her house, the threats. Jim listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. You have any proof of the threats? Jim asked when Evan finished. My word. And Margaret's. That's not going to be enough if this goes to court. Steele will have witnesses saying he was polite and concerned. You'll have nothing but your testimony. Then that's what I have. Jim signed the form and slid it across the desk. This is your official written warning. One more security breach and you're terminated. Sign here. Evan signed without reading it. What was the point? He'd already jumped off the cliff. Worrying about the paperwork was pointless. The lawyers are going to try to intimidate you, Jim said as Evan stood to leave. That's their job. Don't let them rattle you. Stick to the facts. Don't speculate. Don't embellish. Just tell them exactly what you saw and heard. Thanks, Jim. Don't thank me. I'm just doing my job. But Brooks? Jim met his eyes. I've got 2 daughters. If what you're saying is true, if Steele really did what you claim, then I'm glad you spoke up. My girls deserve to work in a world where men can't get away with that. Evan nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and headed for conference room A. The lawyers were exactly what he expected. Expensive suits, practiced expressions, leather briefcases that probably cost more than his car. 2 men, both in their 50s, with the kind of confidence that came from winning more battles than they'd lost. Mr. Brooks? The taller one stood, extending a hand. I'm Richard Vance, representing Mr. Marcus Steele. This is my colleague, James Pritchard. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us. Evan shook their hands, noting that he hadn't actually agreed to anything. What do you need from me? Just your version of events from 2 nights ago. We're trying to get a clear picture of what happened. Richard gestured to a chair. Please, sit. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thin. Evan sat, keeping his back straight, his hands relaxed on the table. Don't show fear. Don't give them anything to use against you. Let's start simple, Richard said, pulling out a legal pad. You drove Ms. Hale home from Marchand's restaurant on the night in question. Is that correct? Yes. And what was Ms. Hale's condition when you picked her up? She was impaired, unsteady on her feet, confused, emotional. Impaired how? Was she slurring her words, stumbling? Both. And did Ms. Hale tell you she'd been drinking? Evan saw the trap immediately. She told me she'd had 1 drink, 1 glass of champagne, and she said it tasted strange, that something was wrong. But you're not a medical professional. You can't know whether her condition was due to alcohol or something else. No, but I know what drunk looks like, and this was different. James leaned forward. Different how? Drunk people are usually loud or sleepy. They have some control, even if it's impaired. Ms. Hale was terrified. She knew something was wrong with her body, and she couldn't stop it. That's not alcohol. That's something else. Or that's severe alcohol intoxication combined with exhaustion and stress. Richard made a note. Did Ms. Hale ask you to take her to a hospital? I offered. She refused. Why? She was afraid of how it would look, afraid people would use it against her. So she was conscious enough to make that decision? To calculate the political ramifications? Another trap. She was conscious enough to know she was vulnerable. That's different from being in control. The questioning continued for another 30 minutes, the lawyers probing every detail, looking for inconsistencies or admissions. Evan kept his answers short and factual, refusing to speculate or interpret. Just the facts, like Jim had advised. Finally, Richard set down his pen. Let's talk about what happened at Ms. Hale's residence. You claim Mr. Steele arrived and made threats. Is that correct? I don't claim it. It happened. What exactly did Mr. Steele say? Evan recited the conversation as precisely as he could remember it. Richard and James exchanged glances. Mr. Steele has a very different recollection of that encounter, Richard said. He remembers arriving at Mrs. Hale's home out of concern for a colleague. He remembers you being aggressive and preventing him from checking on her welfare. He remembers feeling threatened by you. That's not what happened. It's his word against yours. And frankly, Mr. Brooks, your credibility is questionable. You're Miss Hale's employee. You have a financial incentive to support her version of events. What financial incentive? I haven't been offered anything. Not yet. But surely you expect some kind of compensation for your testimony. A promotion, perhaps. A raise? The one Ms. Hale denied you just the day before this incident. Evan felt his temper rising but forced it down. I expect nothing. I'm telling the truth because it's the truth. How noble. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Let me be direct with you, Mr. Brooks. You've made serious accusations against a respected businessman, accusations that could damage his reputation and cost him millions in business opportunities. If you continue with this story, mister, Steele will have no choice but to defend himself. That means lawsuits, depositions, discovery. Your entire life will be examined under a microscope. Your finances, your relationships, your fitness as a parent. The last phrase hit like a physical blow. Evan's hands clenched under the table. Are you threatening my daughter? Of course not. I'm simply pointing out that legal proceedings have wide-ranging impacts. Custody arrangements can be questioned, parenting decisions scrutinized, all as part of establishing character and credibility. Richard leaned forward. But it doesn't have to come to that. If you were to reconsider your statement, acknowledge that perhaps you misinterpreted what you saw, that Ms. Hale's condition might have been due to alcohol rather than anything more sinister, then Mr. Steele would have no reason to pursue legal action. You want me to lie. I want you to consider the possibility that you might have been mistaken, that in the dark, under stress, you might have misread the situation. Evan looked at both lawyers, seeing them clearly for what they were. Not seekers of truth, not defenders of justice. Just men doing a job, and the job was protecting their client regardless of what he'd actually done. I wasn't mistaken, Evan said quietly, and I'm not changing my statement. Richard sighed. Then I'm afraid we'll be seeing you in court, Mr. Brooks. I hope you have a good lawyer. I hope you can sleep at night, Evan replied, standing, knowing you're helping a predator escape consequences. That's defamatory, James warned. We could add that to the lawsuit. Add whatever you want. I'm done here. Evan walked out before they could say anything else, his heart pounding, his hands shaking with suppressed rage. They'd threatened Mia, implied they'd go after his custody, question his parenting, drag his daughter into their legal war. He made it to the stairwell before the anger overwhelmed him, and he slammed his fist into the concrete wall. Pain radiated up his arm, sharp and clarifying. He'd probably bruised his knuckles, maybe cracked something, but the physical pain was easier to deal with than the emotional storm. That was stupid. Evan turned to find Margaret standing in the stairwell doorway. She looked as exhausted as he felt. They threatened Mia, he said, his voice rough. They said they'd question my custody arrangements, my parenting. I know, I heard. David has the conference room bugged. She held up her phone, showing a recording app. Not legal for court, but good for knowing what we're up against. They're going to destroy me. They're going to try. There's a difference. Margaret moved closer, examining his hand. You need ice on that. Maybe an X-ray. I need to get my daughter and disappear somewhere these people can't find us. That's fear talking. I understand it. I feel it too. But running won't help. It'll just make you look guilty. Evan laughed bitterly. And staying will make me look what? Brave? Stupid? Dead? Human. It'll make you look human. Margaret met his eyes. I've been where you are right now, terrified, wanting to run, wanting to protect the people I love by removing myself from their lives. But running doesn't protect anyone. It just means you're alone when the consequences catch up to you. What am I supposed to do? I can't afford lawyers like Steele has. I can't fight this. You don't have to fight it alone. Margaret pulled out her phone again, made a call. Patricia? It's Margaret. I need that recommendation you offered. Yes? Now. Conference room C in 10 minutes. Thank you. She hung up and looked at Evan. Patricia Joe, board member. Her sister is a civil rights attorney who specializes in workplace retaliation and harassment cases. She works pro bono for whistleblowers. I'm not a whistleblower. I'm a rideshare driver who saw something. You're an employee who reported misconduct by a business partner and is now facing retaliation. That's textbook whistleblower status. Margaret started walking toward the elevator. Come on, let's get your hand looked at and then meet with the lawyer. We're fighting this, Evan, both of us. Why are you helping me? You could cut me loose, distance yourself, protect your own position. Margaret stopped, turning to face him. Because you didn't cut me loose when you had every reason to. Because you stood up in that boardroom and told the truth when it would have been safer to stay silent. Because you're the first person in years who's helped me without wanting something in return. Her voice softened. And because I have a son who doesn't trust me, doesn't talk to me, because I've spent his whole life prioritizing the company over people. Maybe if I help you protect your daughter, I can learn something about being the kind of parent who deserves trust. They took the elevator down to the ground floor, where the company nurse examined Evan's hand and declared it bruised, but not broken. She wrapped it, gave him ice and ibuprofen, and told him to see a real doctor if the pain got worse. Patricia Joe was waiting in conference room C with another woman, younger, maybe late 30s, with sharp eyes and a leather portfolio. She stood when they entered. "You must be Evan Brooks." She extended her hand. "I'm Rachel Joe, Patricia's sister. I understand you're in need of legal representation." "I can't afford—" "Pro bono," Rachel interrupted. "I don't charge whistleblowers. Corporate retaliation cases are my specialty, and from what Patricia tells me, you've got a strong one." They sat, and Evan went through the story again. Rachel took notes, asked pointed questions, and didn't react with shock or disbelief to any of it. When he finished, she sat back and studied him. "Marcus Steele is going to come at you with everything he has," she said bluntly. "He'll try to discredit you, destroy your reputation, make you unemployable. He'll dig into your past looking for anything he can use. Debts, relationships, minor legal infractions, anything. I've got nothing to hide. Everyone has something to hide. The question is whether it's relevant." Rachel flipped through her notes. "But here's the thing. Steele made a critical mistake when his lawyers threatened your custody arrangements. That's not establishing credibility. That's intimidation. And it shows they're scared." "Scared of what? I'm nobody." "You're a witness, an independent third party with no apparent motive to lie. That makes you dangerous." Rachel leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. Steele will file a defamation suit against both you and Margaret. We'll file a countersuit for workplace retaliation and attempted witness intimidation. Discovery will be ugly for everyone, but we have the advantage." "What advantage?" "The truth, and more importantly, Marchand's has security cameras." Rachel smiled. "I've already submitted a preservation request to the restaurant. They can't delete the footage now without destroying evidence. We'll see exactly what condition Margaret was in when she left. Whether Marcus followed her, all of it." Evan felt a flicker of hope for the first time since the lawyers had threatened Mia. "You think we can win?" "I think we can make Steele's life miserable enough that he'll want to settle. And settlement means he backs off, leaves you alone, and Margaret keeps her position." Rachel closed her portfolio. "But I need you to be absolutely certain you're ready for this. Once we file, there's no going back. Your life will be under scrutiny. The media will get involved. It'll be hard on you and your daughter." Evan thought about Mia, about the promise he'd made to be there when she got back from her field trip, thought about the world he wanted her to grow up in, where speaking truth didn't make you a target. "I'm ready," he said. "What do I need to do?" Rachel spent the next hour walking him through what to expect, what not to say to anyone, how to handle media if they came calling. Margaret sat through it all, occasionally adding details or clarifying points. By the time they finished, it was almost 3 o'clock. "I need to go," Evan said, checking his phone. "My daughter's field trip ends at 3:30. "Go," Margaret said. "Be with her. Let me handle the rest of this for now." Evan stood, then hesitated. "What happens on Monday? Do I still have a job?" "You still have a job. I'm making sure of it." Margaret's expression was fierce. "HR tried to suspend you pending investigation. I told them if they suspended you, I'd resign and take the whole story public. They backed down." "You'd really resign over me?" "I'd resign over the principal. You did the right thing, and you're being punished for it. That's not a company I want to lead." She managed a tired smile. "Besides, I suspect we're going to need each other before this is over. Better to keep you close." Evan left the building and drove toward Mia's school, his mind spinning. In less than 12 hours, his life had been completely upended. He'd gone from invisible maintenance worker to key witness in what was shaping up to be a major corporate scandal. He'd made powerful enemies and unlikely allies. He'd risked everything for a woman he barely knew and a principle he couldn't compromise. And somehow, despite all the fear and uncertainty, he felt more alive than he had in years. He pulled into the school parking lot at 3:25, finding a spot near the buses. Other parents were already gathering, waiting for their kids to return from the aquarium. Evan recognized a few faces. Other single parents, mostly, people who understood the juggling act of work and childcare and never quite enough hours in the day. The buses pulled up at 3:35, and Evan watched the doors open, kids spilling out with the chaotic energy of 7-year-olds who'd spent the day looking at sea creatures. He spotted Mia near the back, her face bright with excitement, clutching a stuffed dolphin from the gift shop. She saw him and ran, launching herself into his arms with the complete trust of a child who believed her father would always catch her. "Daddy, you're here! You promised, and you're here!" Evan held her tight, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo and the faint scent of the aquarium that clung to her clothes. "Of course I'm here. I wouldn't miss hearing about your trip." There were sharks and dolphins and this huge octopus that the lady said was super smart, like it could solve puzzles and everything. And I got this dolphin with my gift shop money, see? I'm going to name her Splash. She chattered all the way to the car, barely pausing for breath, telling him about every exhibit and every fact she'd learned. Evan listened to every word, committing it to memory. Because this was what mattered. Not corporate lawyers or defamation suits or the storm that was coming. This perfect moment with his daughter, her joy uncomplicated by the adult world's ugliness, her trust in him absolute and unearned and precious beyond measure. They stopped for pizza on the way home. Evan's budget was shot anyway, might as well celebrate, and Mia told him more about the aquarium between bites of pepperoni. She talked about her favorite shark, a hammerhead, and how the guide said sharks were mostly misunderstood and not really that dangerous to people. "Kind of like you, Daddy," she said, completely serious. "People think you're just the fix-it guy, but you're actually really smart and brave." Evan's throat tightened. "What makes you say that?" "Aunt Lisa told me. She said you were being brave at work today, that you stood up for what was right even though it was scary." Evan made a mental note to have words with his sister about age-appropriate information sharing. "Did she tell you what I was standing up for?" "Nope. Just that it was brave, and that I should be proud of you." Mia took another bite of pizza. "I'm always proud of you, though. Even when you're just fixing stuff or driving people around, you're the best daddy." Evan had to look away, blinking hard against sudden tears. Here he was, worried about lawyers and lawsuits and losing everything, and his daughter was proud of him for fixing stuff and driving people around. Proud of him for just being her father. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart," he managed, every single day. They finished dinner and drove home, Mia falling asleep in the back seat with Splash the dolphin clutched against her chest. Evan carried her inside, put her to bed still in her clothes, she was exhausted from the field trip, and stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep. Whatever happened next, whatever consequences came from his choice to speak up, he'd face them. Because this little girl deserved to grow up in a world where doing the right thing mattered, where power didn't always win, where silence wasn't the price of safety. His phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "Steele's lawyers filed the defamation suit. Rachel's filing our countersuit tomorrow. It's officially war." Evan looked at his sleeping daughter, then back at his phone. He typed back, "Then we fight." Because really, what other choice was there? The weekend passed in a strange liminal space between normal life and waiting for the other shoe to drop. Evan took Mia to the park on Saturday, pushed her on the swings, helped her feed the ducks at the pond. He made her favorite breakfast on Sunday, chocolate chip pancakes again, and they spent the afternoon building an elaborate fortress out of couch cushions for Splash the dolphin. Normal father-daughter things that felt precious and fragile, like he was storing up memories against some future loss. His phone stayed mostly quiet, which was almost worse than the barrage of threatening texts from earlier in the week. Rachel had warned him this would happen. The calm before discovery, before depositions, before everything got worse. Marcus Steele's lawyers were gathering ammunition. So was Rachel. And Evan was caught in the middle, trying to protect his daughter from the storm he'd brought into their lives. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the kind of cold rain that made everything feel harder. Evan got Mia ready for school, packed her lunch, walked her to Lisa's car. "You look terrible," Lisa said bluntly. "Did you sleep at all?" "Some." A lie. He'd managed maybe 3 hours total, his mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. "Evan, I'm worried about you. About both of you." Lisa glanced at Mia, who was already buckling herself in. "If this gets bad, if you need me to take her for a while, it won't come to that. But if it does, I won't let it." Evan kissed Mia through the window. Have a good day at school, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Daddy. He watched them drive away, then got in his own car and headed to Hale Industries. The parking lot felt different somehow, charged with tension he might have been imagining. He badged in through the employee entrance, half expecting his credentials to be denied, but the light turned green and the door opened. The warehouse floor was busy with the Monday morning rush, but conversations died as Evan walked past. People who usually nodded hello suddenly found their clipboards fascinating. Word had spread. It always did in places like this. The maintenance guy had stood up in a board meeting, had accused Marcus Steele, had started a war. Evan ignored the stares and headed for the maintenance office to clock in. His supervisor, Frank Morrison, was waiting there with an expression that promised nothing good. Brooks, my office, now. Frank's office was barely bigger than a closet, crammed with filing cabinets and safety manuals and the accumulated debris of 30 years in facilities management. He closed the door behind them and turned to face Evan. "You've put me in an impossible position," Frank said without preamble. "HR wants you gone. Legal wants you gone. Half the executive team wants you gone. But as Spimsiz, Hale has made it very clear that firing you will result in consequences they're not ready to face." "I'm sorry. Don't apologize. I don't want your apologies. I want to understand what the hell you were thinking." Frank sat heavily in his chair. "You've been a good employee, Evan. Reliable, hardworking, never caused problems. And then you walk into a board meeting and blow up your entire career. Why?" Evan thought about all the complicated reasons, all the principles and fears and choices that had led him to that moment. But what came out was simpler. Because it was right. And someone had to. Frank studied him for a long moment. "You know what's going to happen now, don't you? Even if you keep your job, even if Hale protects you, you'll always be that guy, the one who caused trouble, the one who can't be trusted to stay in his lane. Your career here is over, even if your employment isn't." "I know." "And you're okay with that?" "No, but I'm less okay with the alternative." Frank sighed, pulling out a folder. "These are your new assignments. You're being moved to night shift exclusively. No more day warehouse work. No more executive floor. You'll be working midnight to 8 a.m., doing deep cleaning and maintenance when the building's mostly empty." Evan felt something sink in his chest. Night shift meant barely seeing Mia. Meant asking Lisa to take her more nights, disrupting the fragile balance they'd built. "Is this punishment or protection?" he asked. "Both. It gets you out of sight during business hours, removes you from situations where you might interact with board members or executives. And yes, it's also punishment, because HR needs to show they took action without actually firing you." Frank met his eyes. "I'm sorry, Evan. It's the best I could do." "I understand. When do I start?" "Tonight, midnight. Don't be late." Evan left Frank's office and walked through the warehouse in a daze. Night shift. He'd have to tell Mia he wouldn't be there for bedtime anymore, wouldn't be there for breakfast, would have to explain why Daddy's job had suddenly changed without explaining the real reasons why. His phone buzzed. Margaret. "Need to see you. Top floor. David's office. Now." Evan took the elevator up, ignoring the stares from the executives who got on at the third floor and immediately moved as far from him as the small space allowed. When the doors opened on the 14th floor, he stepped out into the hushed luxury of the executive suite, feeling more out of place than ever. David waved him toward Margaret's office. "She's waiting. Go on in." Margaret was at her desk, but she looked different. Tired, yes, but also somehow lighter. Like she'd put down a weight she'd been carrying for years. "They moved you to night shift," she said without preamble. "How did you—" "I still have access to HR systems, for now." She stood, moving to the window. "I'm sorry, Evan. I tried to prevent it, but they needed to show they'd taken disciplinary action. It was this or suspension." "It's fine. I'll manage." "It's not fine. You're being punished for telling the truth." She turned to face him. "But there's been a development. The security footage from Marchand's came through this morning. Rachel sent me the relevant clips." Evan's pulse quickened. "And?" "It shows everything. Me arriving for dinner with Marcus, functioning normally, both of us at the bar, Marcus handing me a drink, 20 minutes later me trying to stand and nearly falling, Marcus trying to guide me toward the elevator, me pushing him away and running for the exit, knocking over a table on the way out." Margaret's voice was steady, clinical, like she was talking about someone else. It shows Marcus following me outside, watching which direction my rideshare went, then getting in his own car and following. That's proof. It's evidence. Strong evidence. Rachel thinks it's enough to force a settlement. Margaret pulled up something on her computer, turned the screen toward him. The board met this morning. Emergency session. Patricia presented the footage. The vote was unanimous. The merger with Steele's company is canceled. All business relationships severed immediately. Evan felt something unknot in his chest. They believed you. They believed the video, and they believed that the liability of continuing any association with Marcus Steele outweighed whatever financial benefits the merger might have brought. She smiled, but it was complicated, edged with bitterness. Turns out corporate boards do have principles. They're just economic rather than moral. What about the lawsuit? Is he dropping it? Not yet. But Rachel's confident. With the footage and the board's decision, his defamation case falls apart. We have proof I was impaired, proof he followed me, proof of everything I claimed. His lawyers know this. They're probably advising him to settle and move on. So it's over. Margaret's expression shifted. For you, maybe. For me, it's more complicated. The board wants me to take a leave of absence. For my own well-being, they say. But really because having a CEO who was almost assaulted by a business partner is bad optics. They want me to disappear for a while, let the scandal die down, come back when everyone's forgotten. That's not fair. No, but it's reality. She sat on the edge of her desk. I've spent 15 years building this company, sacrificing everything, my marriage, my relationship with my son, my own well-being, for Hale Industries. And now they want me to step aside because I was victimized, because I had the audacity to be vulnerable. You don't have to accept that. Actually, I do, because fighting it would mean months of media attention, more lawsuits, more scrutiny, and I'm tired, Evan. I'm so tired of fighting. She looked at him with something like wonder. You know what's strange? I thought losing this position would destroy me. I thought the company was all I had. But sitting here right now, knowing I'm about to step away, I don't feel destroyed. I feel relieved. What will you do? I don't know yet. Daniel's boarding school called this morning. He's been having problems, acting out. They want me to come get him, spend some time figuring out what's going on. Margaret's voice softened. I haven't spent real time with my son in years. Haven't been present for him in any meaningful way. Maybe this is a chance to fix that, to be the mother I should have been all along. Evan thought about Mia, about the night shifts that would take him away from her. Being present is the hardest part, and the most important. You'd know better than me. Margaret pulled an envelope from her desk drawer. This is for you. Before you argue, just listen. The board approved a discretionary bonus for your actions in reporting misconduct. $50,000. Evan's mind went blank. I can't accept that. You can and you will. It's not payment for testimony. That would be illegal. It's recognition for doing the right thing at great personal cost. The board voted on it. It's legitimate. She held out the envelope. Take it. Use it to get a better car or put it toward Mia's education, or just keep it as a buffer against the next emergency. You've earned it. Evan took the envelope with shaking hands. $50,000. More money than he'd ever had at once. Enough to change things, to give Mia opportunities he'd never been able to afford. Thank you, he managed. Don't thank me. Thank Patricia Joe. She's the one who pushed it through. Margaret stood, extending her hand. I'm stepping down officially next week. Patricia will be interim CEO. She's already committed to reviewing company policies on harassment and retaliation. Your night shift assignment will be temporary. She's promised to move you back to days within a month, with a promotion to facilities supervisor. Evan shook her hand, overwhelmed. A promotion? You've been doing supervisor-level work for years without the title or pay. It's overdue. She smiled. Patricia's good people. She'll take care of you, and Rachel's still handling the legal side until everything's completely resolved. You're protected, Evan. You and Mia both. What about you? Are you protected? I'm wealthy and connected and have excellent lawyers. I'll be fine. Margaret's expression grew serious. But, more importantly, I'm free. For the first time in 15 years, I get to choose what matters instead of letting the company decide for me. That's worth more than any position. They stood there for a moment, two people whose lives had collided by accident and been permanently altered by the collision. Evan thought about that night, about the woman stumbling out of Marchand's, about the choice he'd made to help instead of looking away. "I should go," he said finally. "Let you get back to work." "Actually, I'm done for the day. Done for the week, really. I'm going to pick up Daniel, take him somewhere quiet, try to figure out how to be his mother again." She walked him to the door. "Will you keep in touch? Let me know how you and Mia are doing." "Of course." "Good." She surprised him by pulling him into a brief hug. "Thank you, Evan, for everything. For seeing me when I was invisible. For standing up when it would have been easier to stay silent. For reminding me that some things matter more than corporate success." Evan hugged her back, this woman who'd been a stranger a week ago and was now somehow a friend. "Take care of yourself, Margaret, and your son. The company will survive without you. He won't." She pulled back, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "When did you get so wise?" "Single parenthood. It teaches you what matters real fast." Evan left the executive floor for what might be the last time and took the elevator down to the warehouse level. The rest of his shift passed in a blur of routine maintenance tasks, his mind processing everything that had happened. The lawsuit threat fading, the bonus that would change his and Mia's lives, Margaret stepping away from the company that had consumed her. And tonight, he'd start night shift. Would have to tell Mia that Daddy's schedule was changing, that he wouldn't be there for bedtime stories and morning pancakes. Would have to figure out a new routine, a new balance, a new way of being present even when his job kept him away. At 4 p.m., he clocked out and drove to pick up Mia from after-school care. She was waiting with her backpack and a drawing she'd made. Him and her and Splash the dolphin, all holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "This is beautiful, sweetheart," he said, studying the careful crayon work. "It's our family, you, me, and Splash." She climbed into her car seat. "Mrs. Henderson said families come in all sizes, that even if it's just two people, it's still a family." Evan's throat tightened. Mrs. Henderson is absolutely right. They drove to their favorite diner, the one with the good milkshakes, and the waitress who always remembered Mia's order. Over grilled cheese and fries, Evan tried to figure out how to explain the schedule change. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something. My work schedule is going to change for a little while." Mia's face fell immediately. "You have to work more?" "Different hours. I'll be working at night instead of during the day, which means Aunt Lisa will take you to school in the mornings, and I'll pick you up after school, but I won't be there for bedtime for a while." "How long is a while?" "Maybe a month, maybe less, but I'll still see you every day, and we'll still have our time together. It'll just be different time." Mia pushed her fries around on her plate, processing. "Is it because you were brave at work? Is this a punishment?" Evan wondered again what Lisa had told her. "It's complicated. But yes, partly. Sometimes when you do the right thing, there are consequences. That doesn't mean it wasn't right. It just means it was hard. Like when I told on Tommy for cheating on the spelling test and he got mad at me? Exactly like that. You knew it was wrong, so you told the teacher, even though it made things harder for you. Mrs. Chen said I was brave too." Mia looked up at him. "We're both brave, Daddy." "Yeah, we are." Evan reached across the table, took her small hand in his larger one. "And we're going to be okay. I promise, promise." She smiled then, her 7-year-old faith in his promises still unshaken. "Promise, promise." That night, Evan tucked her into bed and read her 3 stories instead of the usual one, trying to store up the moment against the nights he'd miss. Mia fell asleep with Splash clutched against her chest and one hand holding onto Evan's finger, like she was afraid to let go. He sat there long after she'd fallen asleep, watching her breathe, this perfect small person who trusted him completely. Thought about all the ways he could have chosen differently over the past week. Could have driven past Marchand's instead of accepting that ride. Could have stayed silent in the boardroom. Could have protected himself instead of standing up. But then he thought about the man he wanted to be for Mia, the example he wanted to set. And he knew that even with all the costs, he'd make the same choices again. His phone buzzed quietly. A text from Rachel Joe. "Steele's lawyers called. They want to settle. Dropping all claims, No admission of wrongdoing on either side, confidentiality agreement. Margaret's considering it. Wanted you to know. Evan typed back. Tell her to do what's right for her. I'm okay either way. The response came quickly. She said you'd say that. Also said to tell you you're a good man. Don't let the world convince you otherwise. Evan smiled in the darkness of Mia's room, then carefully extracted his finger from her grip and headed to his own bedroom. He had 3 hours before his first night shift started, and he needed to try to sleep. The month that followed was harder than Evan had anticipated. Night shift meant sleeping during the day while Mia was at school, being awake for a few hours in the afternoon when she got home, then leaving for work just as she was getting ready for bed. The rhythm was wrong, opposite to everything his body wanted, but he adapted because he had to. Lisa stepped up in ways that humbled him, taking Mia more nights than she probably should have, helping with homework and bedtime stories and all the small rituals of childhood. Evan tried to pay her from the bonus money, but she refused. You're my brother, she said simply. This is what family does. The settlement with Marcus Steele went through quietly. No admission of wrongdoing, but a clause that prevented him from contacting either Evan or Margaret ever again, with severe financial penalties if he violated it. The defamation suit disappeared. Marcus's merger with another company fell through when the security footage somehow leaked to the business press, and the last Evan heard, he'd relocated to Europe to pursue opportunities there. Margaret kept her promise to stay in touch. She sent occasional texts, updates about Daniel, how they'd spent 2 weeks at a cabin in Montana, just talking and hiking and trying to rebuild trust. How he'd agreed to switch to a day school near where she lived, let her try this parenting thing for real. How hard it was, and how worth it. Being present is terrifying, she wrote in one late-night message. What if I'm still not enough? What if I've damaged him too badly to fix? Evan wrote back, You show up anyway. That's all any of us can do. Show up and try and hope it's enough. Patricia Jo proved to be exactly the kind of CEO Margaret had described. Principled, fair, focused on people as much as profit. She implemented new harassment policies, created an anonymous reporting system, and made it clear that retaliation against whistleblowers would result in immediate termination. And true to her word, exactly 4 weeks after Evan started night shift, she moved him back to days with a promotion to facilities supervisor. Better pay, normal hours, and most importantly, time with Mia. The first morning Evan was there to make breakfast again, Mia launched herself at him with such force she nearly knocked him over. You're home, for real home, for breakfast. For breakfast, Evan confirmed, already mixing the chocolate chip pancake batter. And dinner, and bedtime. Back to normal. Better than normal, Mia said, setting the table with elaborate care. Because now you're a supervisor. Aunt Lisa said that means you're the boss of fixing things. Something like that. They ate breakfast together, and Evan walked her to the bus stop, and when he got to work, his new office, small, but his own, was waiting with his name on the door. Evan Brooks, facilities supervisor. He stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it in. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he hadn't saved but recognized. Margaret. Daniel asked if we could meet your daughter sometime. He said any kid with a dad brave enough to stand up to bullies must be pretty cool. Interested in a park meetup next weekend? Evan smiled and typed back, Mia would love that. Fair warning, though. She'll want to tell him everything about dolphins. Daniel's into marine biology. They'll get along perfectly. That Saturday, Evan and Mia met Margaret and Daniel at Riverside Park. Daniel turned out to be a quiet 16-year-old with his mother's eyes and an unexpected gentleness with younger kids. Within 10 minutes, he was helping Mia climb the big slide she was usually too scared to try, encouraging her with the patient firmness of an older brother. Margaret and Evan sat on a bench, watching their kids play. He's good with her, Evan observed. He's good with everyone. I just never slowed down enough to notice. Margaret looked different, softer somehow, less armored. We start family therapy next week. His idea, actually. He said if we're going to do this, do the whole mother-son thing, we should do it right. Smart kid. He gets it from his father. I mostly just contributed stubbornness and anxiety. She smiled. But we're trying. That's something. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Mia and Daniel chase each other around the playground equipment. Other parents dotted the park, caught up in their own small dramas and victories. The world kept turning, indifferent to the battles Evan and Margaret had fought. "Do you ever regret it?" Margaret asked suddenly. "Speaking up? All the consequences that followed?" Evan thought about the night shifts, the fear, the lawyers, the way his life had been upended. Thought about Mia's hand in his, her trust that he'd do the right thing. "No," he said honestly. "I regret that it was necessary. But I don't regret doing it." "Me neither. For the first time in years, I'm learning who I am outside of being a CEO. I'm terrible at it so far, but I'm learning." She glanced at him. "You taught me something important, Evan. You showed me that the most powerful thing we can do isn't climbing ladders or closing deals. It's choosing to see people, to help when help is needed, to stand up even when standing up costs us everything. I didn't teach you that. You already knew it. You just forgot for a while. Maybe. But you reminded me." Mia came running over, breathless and excited. "Daddy, Daniel says there's an aquarium near his house, and maybe we could all go together sometime. Can we, please?" Evan looked at Margaret, who nodded. "We'd love that. How about next month?" "Yes!" Mia pumped her fist in victory, then ran back to where Daniel was waiting to push her on the swings. Margaret stood to leave, gathering her things. "Thank you, Evan, for that night, for the board meeting, for all of it. You saved my life in more ways than one. You saved mine too, that bonus, the promotion. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. Not because of what you did for me, because it was right, because you deserved it." She smiled. "Besides, someone wise once told me that doing the right thing is its own reward, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." They parted ways as the afternoon sun started to sink toward the horizon, heading to their separate cars, their separate lives that had intersected so unexpectedly. Evan watched Margaret and Daniel drive away, then turned to where Mia was still playing, her laughter carrying across the park. His phone buzzed one last time. A text from Patricia Joe. "Board meeting next week. We'd like you to present on facilities improvements and new safety protocols. Your expertise is valuable. Don't undersell yourself." Evan stared at the message, something warm expanding in his chest. A year ago, he'd been invisible. The maintenance guy nobody noticed, nobody listened to. Now he was being asked to present to the board, his knowledge valued, his voice heard. "Daddy, come push me," Mia called from the swings. Evan pocketed his phone and jogged over, positioning himself behind the swing. "You ready?" "I'm ready. Push me high, all the way to the sky." He pushed, and she soared, her delighted laughter filling the air. And in that moment, with his daughter flying higher and higher, her joy uncomplicated and pure, Evan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate kind, the kind that came from wanting things to be different, but the solid kind, built on evidence. Evidence that doing the right thing mattered, that speaking truth had power, that one person's choice to help another could ripple outward in ways impossible to predict. He thought about that night outside Marchand's, about the choice to pull over instead of driving past, about every choice that followed, each one building on the last, until they'd somehow arrived here. At this park, on this perfect autumn afternoon, with their children laughing and their lives irrevocably changed for the better. "Higher, Daddy, higher!" Evan pushed harder, watching Mia soar, and smiled. Sometimes the most powerful acts didn't make noise. They didn't come with recognition or reward. They were quiet things, done in darkness, witnessed only by the people they helped and the conscience of the person doing them. But those quiet acts had power. They changed lives. They changed the world, one small choice at a time. And Evan Brooks, facilities supervisor and single father, ride-share driver, and unlikely hero, had learned that the hard way. He'd learned it was worth it, every single time.